screen. Beautiful. So when I think about my journey into design, I'm thinking about being really enthusiastic and really excited about the possibility of making things better for people. And as part of that, what we start doing in our careers is to sort of build a practice around tools and skills and approaches and ways of working that is, I think, quite unique to this particular profession. And when we come into organizations, what happens out of a sudden is that we're confronted with all these people who have never spoken to a customer, who don't really care about customers, who are sort of quite skeptical around this idea that speaking to other humans and taking their lived experience at face value is the thing that could change the way the business is showing up in the market, or I guess succeeding in what they're trying to achieve. And so what fundamentally as designers, I think what we're bringing in is a completely different mindset and skill set into businesses. And when we just keep doing what we're doing with our work, we start sometimes forgetting that we're not meeting people where they are. We're not meeting the business where they are. The course that we've developed really responds to the idea that while we have a day job that is largely following a process akin to the double diamond, and it's around delivering outputs and outcomes that center on the customer, the other job that no one speaks about is the change job. You know, the effort that we have to go through to build relationships, not just with other designers and our key stakeholders who release funds, but also people in product, people in engineering, people in risk, people in finance. Doesn't talk about the fact that we need stories to elevate and communicate the value that we bring beyond just the insights that we gather, right? How will your CFO understand the value of spending 4 weeks in research without us being able to actually be explicit around that value? How can we say that, you know, design adds value to the business without being able to quantify that somehow? We run into these challenges not just because they aren't explicitly part of the mandate we got given when we get hired, but also because the way that we go about driving change inside organizations is a fundamentally different approach, right? The job that we apply for and the job that we get hired for runs along a quite specific process that, you know, spans something akin to the double diamond, that is predictable, that is plannable, and that shows up in the agile working framework, in Trello, and all of these programs and tools that we're using to manage our productivity across an organization. The change job, how to build relationships, which meetings to attend to make sure your key stakeholders perceive you as visible and contributing. All of these things aren't part of the systems that we're currently part of. And so when we think about design thriving in uncertainty and design being most impactful in complexity, what we're actually saying is that for the value of design to show up, the other job we have to lean into is driving change. And we don't get paid for that. There is no best practice. There is no blueprint around this. Yet we still have to do it in order for our day jobs to actually succeed. Because what does happen at some point is when we face restructures, reduction in numbers, and a lack of funding for research or design activities, what has happened is that we've invested all of our time in meeting our KPIs of our day jobs, but very little of our energy and focus on the things that have to be true in our context for our design work to show up and deliver value. And that is where we often get frustrated, where we get burnt out, where we go, well, if we just do more or better design work, surely people will notice. But if we haven't created the conditions for design to show up and add value, we're really, really going to struggle. And so I guess before I sort of move on and talk a bit about how I think the change job needs to I guess move forward and how we can actually lean into the change job, I just want to check in with you here to go, does this resonate with you? What comes up for you as you think about your day job and your change job? And feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself.
Oh, this totally resonates with me.
Yeah. Do you have like maybe an example or a story that comes to mind when you think about that difference that you are willing to share with us here today? So in what way does it resonate, I guess? Yeah. And Jazz, you say you feel like all you do is that change job.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, and I think ultimately the other side of that coin is, right, if all we do is the change job and we don't have any deliverables to offer, that's not
Yeah,
going to work either, right?
yeah,
So it is striking that balance and figuring out how across the team that we work with, can we drive change while delivering value in line with that change. And thank you, Lizzie, for that contribution where you're saying, stakeholders who aren't designers just look at our visual outputs and think that's all we do, where there's a lot of things that have to happen for those outputs to actually show up. Denny, thank you for your contribution here as well in the chat, right? Where, we have to do a lot of the coaching and the mindset shift before we can even start discovery or start the research. And sometimes that can be all consuming. So I think when we think about change in organizations, what has been normalized is change management, right? And it's been normalized that we are in one part here, this is one state, in the future we're going to be there, and we're going to plan our way into the new future. But I think, how do you plan into re-establishing a narrative of what is normal, what is possible, and what is valuable? Personally, I have not experienced anybody successfully planning that, but I've seen many examples of people navigating an ever-evolving iteration of what is true and accepted within the organization. And the way they've done that essentially boils down into 3 particular areas of focus. The big thing is that being able to read what's around you. It's being able to read the signs and understand the conditions within which you work. And we've termed that context literacy. And a tangible example of seeing the signs could be, attending an all hands by one of your key stakeholders or your CEO, and them talking about what they're prioritizing in the next quarter. A sign is sitting in a conversation or a meeting, maybe with the engineering team or the product team, and listening into what they're currently struggling with. All of the signs that we're experiencing show up in conversation around us, but we don't have the right lens or the right cues to listen for. We're not going to really understand what's happening around us. And so part of the course focus is to really strengthen context literacy as a skill and as a capacity. The next part of that is to go, okay, if I've got all these signs that help me understand what's sitting around me, to understand the landscape I'm operating in, how do I navigate that, right? And navigation, for me personally, is a core observable leadership skill that as designers we are actually really well placed to lean into because of the inherent skills and mindsets we bring, right? Navigation is about not just looking at the end goal, at the destination of the journey, but the next step is to scope our activity in line of what the next thing is that we need to do. Navigation is around understanding trade-offs and compromises. Navigation is around navigating people's personalities and politics within the organization. The activity of navigation is ultimately how we journey towards an outcome, rather than trying to plan our way there. And then the last area of focus that I think we talk more often about than we think, but haven't really understood as such, as weaving. When I talk about weaving, I'm talking about building a pathway between all these different signs towards the destination that we're seeking. Really tangible weaving skills is storytelling. right? Storytelling is a skill that helps us connect with what's important to us, with what's important to others. Facilitation is a really important weaving skill. It's weaving people of different beliefs and lived experiences and skill sets into a single conversation. These are examples of weaving, of bringing together difference into a unified possibility. And so everything that I think the change job relies on is us getting really, really good at these three things while maintaining and moving forward in our day jobs. And so if I think about the way that I guess this has come together into something that we can actually tangibly work through, it's what we call navigating human-centered change. And we've called it navigation for a reason, because it's not planning for human-centered change. It's not doing human-centered design. It's navigating the intersection of change and human-centered ways of working and focusing and designing. And so one thing I want to be really explicit around is that we've actually developed this course with organizations in the industry. So the content of all the modules that you would be going through have been applied and tested with one of New Zealand's largest design teams, which is at Westpac. And they've sort of gone through with us and sort of challenged and poked holes into it and gone, this is not working. And we want to make sure that everything that we share with you, while abstract in theory, needs to be tangible and impactful in practice. And this is what's helped us bridge that divide. We also recognize that all of you are busy all of the time, right? You're like Andrew shared with us today, you've got back-to-back meetings, you hardly get away from your screen or out of the office. So the few hours you can carve out of working in your practice and start working on your practice is different for all of you. So all the course content is available on demand, but we do know from learning design and sort of any other education context is that we best learn in community with others. So each module is sort of covered off or finished with a Cohort Connect session that we deliver online via Zoom, but we can all come together and sort of explore any questions that we have and reflect on the exercises that come with the modules to help us really make this tangible and useful. And it also allows you to connect with others who sort of have shared problems or shared experiences and shared challenges in this space. And I guess what I want to do is just to give you a brief overview of the modules that are part of this course that translate those three areas into some really tangible skills. And then after that, we can come together and have a bit of a korero or a conversation around any questions that you might have or comments that you want to share. So the first thing, as I said, is sort of all about context literacy. And I think the beautiful thing when we think about journeys is that they're happening in landscapes, and it helps us understand our business environment differently. What is the landscape that we are operating in? What does it feel like to be part of that? If we're, traversing a mountain landscape versus an ocean seascape, how do the signs within those landscapes differ? And therefore, what must we look out for? So a whole module is dedicated to really understanding the context within which we're practicing, and to help you identify the signs you can use to plot your own personal journey through your work. Now, sense making for me is a core tool or core skill that we don't practice very intentional. Very often we go, we've got a set of insights and here's what they mean, and I'm going to plot them into a PowerPoint and share them with my exec, and there are three things that we need to do as a result. But sense making is actually a strategic tool that allows us to translate what we do into perceived value for others. And when we talk about challenges like people don't understand our value, what we haven't figured out is the language and the mental models that our work has to show up in order for others to perceive that as valuable. So as part of the sense-making module, we talk about making sense and using frameworks for breaking and remaking sense in ways to allow others to understand what we do and how we add value. We then use storytelling as a way to communicate that sense that we've made. And critically, what we don't want to do here is take you through the story arc that you can Google anywhere. What we're offering you is a framework to understand how the same impact or the same insight shows up in meaningful stories in different ways to different stakeholders. So the way we talk about storytelling is about how do we communicate what we know to be true in ways that meet our audience's needs. Storytelling here becomes a design or a communication tool by design. Facilitation, as we know, is something we practice at all times as part of our work. But very often we talk about facilitation and becoming better facilitators, what we think about is how can I ask better questions? How can I make sure people pay attention? What are the tools that I should use as part of my agenda? These are micro activities that underpin a much larger perspective on facilitation. If we know facilitation to be a weaving tool that helps us build our journey through our context, then we have to understand three things. Why the hell are we facilitating at this moment in time? In this context, what does it mean to facilitate? And what is my role in that? What we're offering you through the course is a perspective through which you can evaluate your current facilitation practice to make it more meaningful and more impactful. And then the last module is focused on reflection, because if there is one thing we know, and it's backed up by all the research under the sun, is that we don't learn from experience. What we do learn from is reflecting on our experiences. And so the standard reflection techniques that we currently have available at work, I would say are suboptimal, and they're aimed at very superficial, what worked, what didn't work reflection styles, very much what you have in the agile stand-up sort of context. What we want to offer you here is a three-step framework that you can apply anywhere within 15 minutes that take you to a much deeper level of understanding of what is happening and connect it with action. And so they are sort of at a really high level, the 5 modules that we cover as part of this course. So they're anchored in applied knowledge as well as lived experience, and connecting that with a shared learning experience to help you apply that at work as soon as possible. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to stop recording.